The same things happen over and over again through time for basically the same reasons. A lot of these things happen once in a lifetime. If you don't go back and see how they worked over time, then you're in trouble. There's a pattern. I could describe the pattern, but there's a pattern that happens over and over again, and we're in a particular spot in the pattern. And then to understand it, not just because it happened before, but to understand mechanistically how it happens, and then one has a sense of how to deal with it. Pandemics come along occasionally, but anything that's important. Let me say the three most important circumstances that existed before we had the downturn, which was caused by a pandemic, but any downturn would have produced the same results. The three most important things that are happening in the world now are that we're at the end, late in a long-term debt cycle in which central banks cannot control monetary policy the same way. They can't lower interest rates. They can't get money to a lot of people who need the money in the traditional way. So just like in 1929 to 1932, there was a debt crisis that came as a result of an excessive amount of debt in the boom years. And then when you have that in 1932, we hit zero interest rates. And what they did in 1932 was the same thing they did in 2008. And that is that the central banks prints a lot of money and buys government bonds. And so we're doing that now. The central government, and also companies and individuals, don't have the capacity to create money. So the central government has the right to determine they can tax people, they can get money from people, and they can spend money on whatever they want to spend money on. But they don't have the right to print money and create money and credit like the central bank does. Central bank is the Federal Reserve. Similarly, the Federal Reserve does not have the right to spend money and determine how it's spent. That's for Congress. Within Congress, but it has a set of rules, like the Supreme Court has a set of rules. That means that the president can't control it, the Congress can't control it, that it's operating in a separate way. And so the important thing to know about this crisis, and that it happened in the 1930s, is that in order to get the checks that we're needing, a lot of people, a lot of companies need checks. Now, where will those checks come from? So there'll be checks from the government. The type of support we're going to receive is two types of support. Where does all this money come from? So the government, when they say, I'm going to pay more for unemployment insurance, or I'm going to give you a loan for a small business, or so on, where do they get the money from? Well, they either tax it, but if they tax it, that's bad. So the government, they can borrow it. That's what a deficit is. The government runs a deficit. And then the question is, who's going to borrow it when everybody's financially strapped? And the Federal Reserve says they have the power to print money, and they will say, I will borrow it and I will lend you the money. So the Federal Reserve is lending the money, and it is also lending others the money. Money is digital. The important thing to know is that all that we think about money is not limited in any way, like there's a certain amount of money out there. It's all make-believe. It's all digital. So they could change the digits and then they can create money. Now that's an important consideration, because if they can create money so easily, how do we know it's going to be of value when they're creating a lot of it? That's one of the considerations that are being faced today. But the main thing to know about this, stepping back for the big picture, is that every individual, every company, and every government has a certain amount of money that comes in the form of income, a certain amount of expenses, and then a certain amount of savings. So you do individually, and all your listeners do. And it works the same way for everyone, so that if their income falls and they less than their expenditures, they're in trouble unless they have a good savings. And then they go to the savings. So all around the world, there are lots of entities that are in trouble in that way. So the government, the two parts of the government, the US government, two parts, want to give checks to people. Now, it's difficult to decide who gets it, who doesn't get it. But if they don't give checks to people or to companies, those will go bankrupt because they may not have enough savings. And so they print money. We call it print. There's not even paper much. It's digitally create money. And then that comes in the form of loans. So as I was saying, there are three important things. That is one. The second is large wealth gap. Third is that we have a rising power in the form of China emerging to compete or challenge the United States leadership. So when you have these three things together, it's a challenging mix, and it's happened repeatedly. Less effective monetary and credit system makes it, they have to print a lot of money, can threaten the value of money. Second, when you have a large wealth gap and you have an economic downturn, people are more inclined to have conflict. So how that's dealt with, we're going to reconsider how that wealth will be divided. And that'll change taxes and relationships. And then the third is we're no longer in a world order where the United States is the only dominant power. These three things existed, and the most important things existed. And then we had the downturn in terms of the virus. So you could think of the virus like being a tsunami that came, and if it went, and if we had no more of it, it still would have left a lot of economic damage. So in all different ways. So the economic damage has to be understood and dealt with. It's the same for every individual, same for every company, same. And if you understand this, then you understand. There are three things. The first is look at your income, your expenses, and your savings, and then do a stress test so that you get yourself secure. If you were to lose your income, or if the income were to fall beyond a certain level, and you play that out, maybe that means you go get unemployment insurance, or whatever. How long can you live in an acceptable lifestyle? And do you have a savings that is adequate for that? I think that we're going to come through more difficult times. I think the next 3 to 5 years will be difficult times. So to be able to adapt well, to invent yourself again, to adapt, and to navigate that, maybe with a perspective of knowing what those other times were like, is the best thing to do. The plan for the worst case scenario and make it terrific is one of the things. The understanding how to triangulate well to deal with whatever problems that you're going to face, and how to work that through to find the path and find your nature. But also, one thing that's helped me a lot is meditation. Meditation gives you a calmness, an equanimity, so that you can almost look at your circumstances and you can navigate it with a clarity of thought without all of that stress. It's healthy because it reduces stress, and it also makes you smarter to make the decisions well. So I would say that would also be something that I would recommend. Because if you have the equanimity that centeredness, that calm centeredness, and you have your plan, and you triangulate well with others so that you can get all the best advice and don't have to approach it in your own head, you're a long way there.